It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today I wanted to talk about Vaultwarden. Now, you see Bitwarden here on the screen, and that's because I want you to know what we're talking about. Vaultwarden is an open source Rust-based version of Bitwarden. Now, the developer himself describes it like this, which is an alternative implementation of the Bitwarden server API written in Rust and compatible with upstream Bitwarden clients. Now, that's very important because if you use the Bitwarden mobile apps, this will work with it. If you're using the Bitwarden installed clients here on the browsers, this should work with Vaultwarden as well. It's really important when you're thinking about trying to get to all your passwords and things like that. Now, Bitwarden itself is also open source. I want you to understand that Bitwarden is an open source password manager for business, which is really, really terrific. They do have a way of monetizing what they do, so there is pricing if you want to use some of their services that are paid. I use some of their services and I pay for it, and I do pay for the organization stuff here because I let my wife and my daughter and my mom have access to a few of the passwords, and I share those things with them because they may need them. It could be something like Netflix where they each have a profile but they need the actual account information to log into Netflix occasionally. It could be something similar to Netflix like Hulu or other services that you're sharing with your family. Now, if this is an organization or a team, you might have passwords for your team that you need to be able to share, but you need to be able to keep secure and encrypted for your clients or for your purposes of supporting your clients or for other reasons inside of your business that you want to make sure things are safe and secure. So if you've ever used Dashlane or 1Password or LastPass or any of those things, this is exactly what Bitwarden is. It does the exact same thing. Now, this is business, but there's also personal. So you can see right here, you can have a free account, a basic free account. You can have a premium account for $10 a year. That's $10 a year. That's less than $1 a month. And then over here, you can get a second-person organization, basically a free two-person organization, which is really nice. And then if you have more than that, you can pay $3.33 a month, which is really terrific. So whenever you think about this, it's just really amazing that you can get this and you can support a really cool open source project at the same time. Now, I use this because it's hosted, and I don't have to worry about ever losing, because of my infrastructure problems, losing all of my passwords. I'm sure something devastating could happen, knock on wood that it doesn't, to the Bitwarden servers, but I'm sure they've got this thing set up where it's redundant and backed up and all that kind of stuff. And the stuff that I don't really have the capability to do at home, but a lot of you might want to do this. Now, in order to have a decent redundancy, you want to have your Bitwarden server running, and then you want to back up the Bitwarden data and the databases. Now, they have a SQLite database that just works out of the box, but you can also set it up to work with MySQL or PostgreSQL. Now, if you're going to use MySQL and PostgreSQL, it's always good to do like an actual dump and not just, copy the mapped folders over out of your Docker container, because you could potentially still get some kind of corruption when you do that. And you don't want that. You want to have a good dump that you can pull back into the MySQL or PostgreSQL systems and really keep that going. Now, that said, there's not a lot of great ways to automate that stuff either, so it's kind of you taking on a little bit of responsibility to run this thing for yourself, but I wanted to go through it because I did Bitwarden way back when I first started my channel, and I thought it's really worth a redo and an updated video. So we're going to talk about Vaultwarden today because it's a much lighter weight implementation of Bitwarden server, which is great. And that's what we like, right? We want something that's lightweight, that's not going to use too many resources, that we can run on a Raspberry Pi or that we can run somewhere else and actually still have access to all of our passwords when we need them. So I want to go through a few things that are caveats to using something like Vaultwarden, because there are some caveats that you'll want to know about. So we're going to do an installation, and then we'll kind of look at the user interface, and I'll have timestamps down in the description like always, so you can jump forward if you just want to see what the user interface looks like. If you want to see what the experience is like, you can kind of watch that part first, and then if you want to do the install and come back, you can. Otherwise, you can go through the install with me. It shouldn't take very long because I've kind of got things already set up, and I've been going through this and testing already. So we're going to jump over and do the installation here right after this. I just want to say thank you so much to all of my subscribers over at Patreon. It just means so much to me that you want to support me and the content that I create, and that you appreciate the content that I've been creating. I cannot tell you how much it means to me. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Now let's get started. Alright, so if you go over to the Vaultwarden page, he's got a lot of really great information. And he's got some information about how to install Vaultwarden. So you can do a Docker pull, and basically this is the basics of installing Vaultwarden right here. You can just do a Docker run. Now I've changed this into a Docker compose file. But if you actually go back up and look inside of his repository, he's got a .env example or template file here. So when you click into here, you can see that he's got a lot of actual environment variables that you can and should go set actually to make the most out of your Vaultwarden experience. So I've kind of gone through and pulled out a few of these that are really, for me, the more specific things that I want. I've got a Docker Compose file that I created based on what he had, and then I added some environment variables as well. So I'm going to go through this and kind of explain what all it is. First is version 3. The service is going to be called Vaultwarden. We're going to say restart always, so if something happens, if it crashes, if we restart the server, we want this to restart when Docker starts up as well. Container name is Vaultwarden, and then the image is the Vaultwarden image /server :latest. So that's going to pull down the latest version of the Vaultwarden server image. We're going to set up a volume here for our data, which is basically going to keep all of our passwords and stuff in a SQLite database. I haven't set up the MySQL or the PostgreSQL yet, so if you want to do that, you'll have to add those to your Docker Compose or have them set up somewhere and then put in those values as well. But for now, SQLite should be plenty. If you're not putting just tons and tons and tons and tons of data in there, SQLite does fine. But we're going to create a space which is inside the folder where we have this. So I like to set up my folders so that I have basically a Docker folder, and inside of that I have like a Vaultwarden folder, and inside of that I have a Docker Compose file, which is what we're working on. So this will put this inside of my Vaultwarden folder. And then it'll create a folder called Vaultwarden Data, and it's going to map that to the container folder called Data. For the ports, it's got 80 mapped to 80. I don't like to use 80 just because on the host side, which is always the left side of the colon, it's just a common port, so it's better to not use that. So we're going to do 8062. On the environment variables, you're going to have your SMTP host. So you need to have email set up to use it the way that I'm going to use it. And the reason I say that is that I don't want people to just be able to sign up and start using my Vaultwarden server. And if you just run it the way he has it on the GitHub site, that's what's going to be able to happen. If people can get to it, they'll be able to use it, and that's not good. So I just want this to be restricted to my family and the email addresses I give them. So we're going to kind of set it up that way. But I also want them to have to verify their email, because if you don't put in a verification and somebody knows what your email is, like, oh, hey, I know his domain is example.com. They could just make up any first part of that email and then just put it at example.com, and then it's going to let them in because you didn't put a verification. So that's what the email verification part is for. So you want to set up your SMTP host, the from, basically who's it from, and usually, depending on the SMTP server you're using, you need to have the same from email as is the user email. So just be aware of that. If you're having issues after you set this up and you tried to create like a from email that doesn't exist, like no reply at example.com, if that email doesn't actually exist and that's not what you're using to send the email, you could get errors from a lot of email services. The from name, you can put anything you want here. Vaultwarden's fine. SMTP security, in my case, it's start TLS. If you're using just TLS, you can do that. If you're using SSL, you can do that. If you don't have any, you can just put none. So you have a few options, and he says what those are inside of that file where we were looking at all of the environment variables. My SMTP port is 587, and then here is my email again, and then here is your SMTP password. So this is the password for your email user. You want to make sure it's a really nice, long, strong password when you're trying to protect something like Vaultwarden anyways. So make sure you've got that. SMTP timeout is 30, which means it's going to try for 30 seconds and then it's going to quit trying to send that email. The auth mechanism for me is plain. Now you can check out what your auth mechanisms are. Your email provider should be able to give that to you. If you run your own server, you should know what that is, but in my case, it's plain. And then I've got a login rate limit max burst, which is 10, which means you can try 10 times, and then it's going to basically lock you out for a little bit, and you'll have to wait, and then you can try again. And then we've got the domain. So what you want to put here is what you're going to have as your Vaultwarden domain. You need to own the domain that you want to put here. So if you're going to try to use example.org, you need to own example.org, and then you can create a subdomain called Vault or Home Vault or whatever you want for example.org. So in this case, we're pretending that I own example.org, and I'm going to create one called homevault.example.org, and it's going to run on HTTPS. The reason we have to do this is that Vaultwarden requires that you access it through HTTPS. And I understand why that is, because you don't want to be pulling over passwords and things across an unencrypted connection to the internet at any time. That's basically saying, hey, here's all my passwords and usernames for all the sites that I visit. That's bad, so this is why it's required. Now you can run it off of localhost without having the HTTPS, but if you try to access it across the network or across the internet, it's going to give you an error when you try to log in saying, hey, you're not set up as HTTPS. You need to set that up. So the invitation org name, again, you can call this whatever you want. This is just what the invitation is going to say if you send an invite to someone. In this case, I'm saying I'm allowing invitations to be true so I can invite family members and things like that to use my Vaultwarden instance. And then I have an admin token. This admin token is very important because this allows us to basically access the admin user interface for Vaultwarden. So you want to have a really long, strong password, and you will need this one. You will absolutely need to have this one somewhere, so you need to put it where you can find it or remember it or whatever. But don't make it easy, because this will give anybody who has, who knows where your server is, the ability to log in as an admin. Signups allowed. So I have this as false. Now you can set this to true, and it'll just allow all signups. And I'll explain what's going on here. We have two things here. So we have signups allowed false. Sign up domains whitelist, and you'll see I've got a few domains here. So this is saying anybody with an email from example.com, mydomain.net, or myotherdomain.org, if they have an email address that ends in that, they would still be allowed to sign up. But if you don't, then you're going to get basically an error that says you can't sign up on this server. Sorry, good try. Now, if you try to fake an email, it's still going to send the verification email, and that's what this part here is about. So it says signups verify true. So you have to verify your account before you can use it. So if you try to use a baloney email, it's going to try to send that. It's going to fail, of course, or you won't be able to check it if it's a real one because you shouldn't have access, and you're still not going to be able to access the system because the person who has it's going to say, I don't know what this is, and they're going to delete it. Signups verify resend. So I'm going to let you resend them for an hour, and then the resend limit is 6. So basically, I'm just saying you can't resend it more than this number of times. So if somebody's trying to hack your system, again, you're just putting limitations to try to keep people out of your system and keep them honest, right? Emergency access allowed is true. This is a very cool feature, and we'll look at it in the user interface a little bit. But basically, it lets you set up an emergency access person. So I have a lot of passwords, and I have a lot of self-hosted stuff, and I have a lot of accounts that my family might need access to if anything bad ever happens to me. And I want them to have access to those things. And knowing that I use different passwords for everything, and I use really strong, complex passwords for everything, they would never in a billion years be able to guess those things. And I don't want to have them written down on paper, so I want to use something secure like Vaultwarden. And this basically allows me to share that with them as an emergency access person if they have to have it. You want to have somebody trusted who uses this. You do not want this just to be whoever. You want somebody you can trust, because they can access this anytime. And you don't want to have somebody who's accessing it to get into your stuff while you're still around and don't want them in there. Sends allowed is true. So this means, can I send some kind of document that gets encrypted by Vaultwarden? So I've set this to true because I might want to do that. And then the web vault enabled is true. So again, we've got that set up. So that's it. That's all of the stuff we need. Now what you got to do is go up here, and you need to replace a lot of these things that are placeholders that don't match your data, of course. And once you've done that, you're just going to save with Control-O, hit Enter, and then use Control-X to exit. And once you're ready, you're just going to do a docker compose up-d. Alright, I've gone in and made the modifications to the Docker Compose file to have all the things that I need to have set up in order to use it with my email address and so on. So we're just going to run this with docker compose up-d. It's going to go out there and look for the latest version of Vaultwarden. Should start pulling that down. There we go. And for some reason, it always makes a little bit of a mess on my screen when I bring the text up larger like this. But there, it should be installed. Now, we can use Portainer to go look at the logs, or we can just do docker compose logs -f, I believe. There we go. So it says Rocket has launched, which is part of the container stuff that they have running. And it tells you that it's running and it's listening on 0000. And port 80 is what it's listening to inside the container. So that is not the port that we forwarded. So I'm going to hit Control-C just to get out of the logs. That won't stop the container from running. And we're going to go to our browser. And we're going to go to the IP address because that's where we have it set up right now. And we're going to go to that port 8062. Now, if everything went well, you should see a screen like this too, where it has that loading icon. Now we don't have an account yet, so we need to create an account. So you see down here we have these two options, login or create account. We're going to click on create account and you'll see the form changes slightly. So it wants the email address that you want to use, so I'll use my fixitdelrio.com address, and then I'll put in my name. And then I need a master password that's long and strong. Let me retype it so I can make sure I know what I spelled. And then we have to retype it, of course. There we go. And we can give a hint if we want to. I don't really like to do hints. I feel like that's just giving people an advantage when they want to try to get into your stuff. And now we're going to hit submit. And you're going to see we get this little error. And it's telling us that we can't do this because it's not going over an HTTPS connection. So in this case, because I'm not doing it through localhost, Vaultwarden realizes like, hey, you're doing this over HTTP. That is not a safe way to set something up like Vaultwarden where you want things to be encrypted. So you need to go set up an HTTPS connection. Now there's different ways you can do that, but the best way that we can do that is to go set up a proxy. So we're going to open up Nginx Proxy Manager. That's the proxy I like to use. If you like to use Trafic, you should learn how to do that with Trafic or HA Proxy or Caddy or any of those things that you might want to use. But in my case, I use Nginx Proxy Manager. It's quite simple. So I'm just going to add a new host here, and I'm going to call this just vault.fic.routemehome.org, and I'm going to hit tab. So you see how that becomes a little chip. Now I own the domain routemehome.org. I already own this domain. You need to own the domain that you're going to set this up for. Here, because this is not running on the same physical system as my Nginx Proxy Manager, I'm going to put in the local IP address of my host machine. And here, I'm going to put in that port that I set. Now, if you change the port on the left side to something different, you should use the port you set. I'm going to tell it to block common exploits, WebSocket support, and then I'm going to come over to SSL. I'm going to tell it, you know what, go ahead and give me a new SSL certificate. I'm going to tell it to force SSL, and I'm going to agree to the Let's Encrypt terms of service. And I'm going to hit save. Now once I save, if this just goes away, then I'll know that I've got a valid SSL certificate. Once I click on that, I've got it up here again, so I'm going to go back to create account. I'm going to retype in that information real quick. I won't make you watch me do that. Alright, once you've done that, you'll be brought back to the login screen, and you should receive an email, assuming you set up your email correctly. Here's what it looks like, and we're going to click on this to verify our email address. That'll take you back to your server for your login, so you now have two login screens open, so you can close one of them. You want to type in your credentials that you just created. And we're going to type in our password. And then log in. And there we go. We are logged in for the first time to our new Vaultwarden setup. And we've got all of the features that we'd want to have, and we're ready to get started actually using it. So let's go through the user interface. And right here we've got send, so we can send files, things like that, and we can encrypt those things. Here we've got all of the tools that are built in to Vaultwarden. So this is something you get for running open source software, is basically the ability to use all of the stuff that's available on Bitwarden, but in your own self-hosted open source version in Vaultwarden, which is great. Now the password generator is a great tool, but it's actually also in the Vault, so you can just use it from there. But if you want to set up the types of passwords you like, you can do that here. So I prefer something more like 18 at a minimum. And I like to have 2 numbers and 2 special characters, and I do want special characters. And you see it updates this as I go. So if I uncheck these things, it'll start changing my password every time. And if I check them again, it'll start changing my password every time. Once I've done that, I can say regen the password, and then if I don't like it, I can regen the password. So you can see that it changes the password for me to make it a nice strong password. Now they do have passphrase as well, which is pretty cool. I like to do 4, and I do like to use the hyphen as the separator right here. But you know, anything beyond that's not always necessary. But you can have a capitalized and you can have a number. So this does make it more complex by doing that. And then we can say regenerate the password. And you see I get a nice long password, but it's something I could potentially remember, right? Plexiglass 4, glucose, suffrage, and resurrect. So if you can just remember those 4 words plus that number, you can log into something without having to use this, potentially. But it's nice to have it saved in here if you do need it. You can import data from an export that you've made. Of course, you can export the Vault, which is really important for backups. I suggest you do this at least once a week. The JSON is probably fine, but you could also use the JSON encrypted, which is also a smart thing. Put a master password on it that you can remember, and then you can import it if you need to. So the nice thing about this, and some of these I've set up, is getting these reports. So exported or exposed passwords report, so you can check to see what's there. Your reused passwords report, so it checks with the system to see how many times you've duplicated and used the same password. That's not a good thing, so it wants to help you fix that problem. Your weak password report, so it'll look at all your passwords and tell you which ones are weak, so you can go in and update them and try to update those on the sites that you use. Unsecured websites report, inactive 2-factor authentication report, and a data breach report, which is always super useful to have as well, and you can put your email in there so you can get that information. So really great tools that they've got built right into this thing, and I mean, seriously, just super easy to use. For the settings side, so right here, now this is not admin settings, it's just the settings for my account. But here I can change my email, my password, my encryption keys, all that kind of stuff. Over here, I've got options, so I can say, 15 minutes, I want it to lock or log me out, one or the other. So it locks my Vault. So if I walk away from my machine for a minute and somebody comes over and they try to get to my stuff, if it's been more than 15 minutes, it's going to be locked out. So you can disable the web icons. So it's just the fave icons. I don't see any point in disabling it. You can enable gravatars if you want to. It doesn't really help me. And then again, you can enable your full width layout. If you don't like the little kind of drop layout that you get like this, you can make it full width. Again, nothing I need. And then the theme, light. Now we've been using light the whole time, so I'm going to go back to light, but I'll show you dark just so you can see it. It is a nice dark theme. And then we'll go right back to the light theme, and that's fine. Your organization. So this is where you can create an organization, and you can have multiple organizations, and then you can set up other users in those organizations with you so that you can share those passwords that you need to share to the organization, and those users will then have access to that through the organization. And they can share passwords with you through that organization as well. So it's really nice. It's kind of like user groups if you want to think it that way. They can share passwords and credentials and things like that. 2-factor authentication, I highly recommend. You should set this up. I recommend it's an authenticator app, but if you like something like Duo and you have an account with them, you can set it up. There are environment variables for setting up Duo, so you need to go check those on the GitHub site and add them to that Docker Compose file I already have set. Same thing for some of these others, but for the authenticator app, it's just going to work for you. No big deal. You have domain rules that are set up. If you have domains like this one is a good example, so bankofamerica.com, bofa.com, these are all really kind of the same. So if you happen to browse to one versus the other, this is how Vaultwarden would know, like, hey, these are all the same site. I'm just going to use your bankofamerica.com credentials. It's fine. You're just saving yourself a little effort by putting in a little effort up front. And then here's the emergency access that we talked about earlier. So trusted emergency contacts, this is where you would add them. So you would click here, you'd put in their email. You'd basically give them view access. You can give them takeover access if you really want to. And then basically the wait time is 7 days. So basically they would go in. I believe the way this is going to work is if they want access, they're going to go in and they'll say, I need access. And it's going to say, okay, you got to wait 7 days. Now you can make this longer, shorter, whatever. And then they're going to have to wait. And it's going to tell you like, hey, this person tried to get access. Do you want to grant it? And if you say no, it's going to not grant it. If you don't answer in 7 days, they're going to get access. And then that kind of lets the system know like, hey, you apparently have not been able to check in for 7 days. There really may be something wrong with you. Now, that's the way I believe this works without having tried it. If I'm wrong and you know that I'm wrong, let me know in the comments and we can make a correction about that. But it's still a really cool feature and I think it's great. So, super useful. And then we're back to the Vault. So, of course, in the Vault, you can save your login credentials. You can save credit card information. You can save identities. And then, of course, you can save any kind of secure notes that you want to keep or share with other people. You can create folders, which is super useful because it lets you put things into buckets. So I can have a my, personal folders kind of thing. I can have a work thing. I can have a contracting thing. I can have, so I can have folders that help me separate stuff out and keep track of passwords in a more organized way is really what this is for. So one of the things to make note of is that if you create a password here or a login, and you say, oh man, I made it under my own account, I meant to put it in the organization, you don't have to recreate it. You can go here and you can say, you can select it and say move to organization, and that'll just move it over there so that those people can basically get it. If you have multiple selected, you can do the same thing. If you need to move them to a different folder, you can just use move the selected to the folder that way. You can have select all and select all. So some good little tools right here in case you need them for managing those passwords that you already have or that you might have created in the wrong place by mistake. All right, so now we're going to go to the admin page. So whenever you want to do admin, you have to actually get out of this. You have to put it in your URL as /admin. And it's going to come up and it's going to ask you for that auth token. So I'm going to go grab my auth token, and then we're going to basically log into the admin panel and take a look at that as well. Don't worry about seeing all this stuff, or if I show you something by accident, I'm going to delete this completely and just redo it, and it's going to be all new information anyways. But I just wanted you to know that this is how you do this. All right, I'm going to paste in that token, and we're just going to log in here. Now you'll see it's got a little bit of a different look, but there are tabs across the top, so make sure you make note of that. So right here you've got general settings, and if you expand these sections you can kind of see what's under there. So here's the URL that I'm using, and basically it says default is true, allow sends. So this is all the stuff that we kind of set up inside of the environment variables, but you can make changes here in the user interface now, and you can do kind of the things that you want to. So a lot of the stuff that we talked about a while ago where I said you might need to set something up and have accounts for that, you're going to be able to set that stuff up in here too for like your second factor authentication. So I've already set a lot of this up to the environment variables. What I wanted you to see that there is an admin user interface where you can make changes in the UI if you want to. So if we go to advanced, we can see a few advanced options here. And then if we go down here to the YubiKey settings, so if you have a YubiKey, you can get that set up. If you have Duo, again, you'll need to set that up, and then you can go in and put in your API keys and stuff like that for Duo. SMTP and email settings are here, so if you want to set them up in the admin user interface, you can. But the one thing you need is, at the very least, you need the admin user interface secret set up as an environment variable so that you can access this. So in the read-only config section, you just need to understand that you can't change any of the settings here. You actually need to go and change them in the environment variables or in your configuration file or wherever you're running this. But in our case, it'd be environment variables, because for these changes, the server has to be restarted for them to take effect. And there's no way to do that from the user interface at this point. And then finally, the backup the database. So if you do need to back up your database or you want to do that, you can do it here from the admin side. You can back it up, save that file off, and export it to another drive. That way you've got it just in case anything happens to your server and you're not completely blocked out of all your websites because all of your credentials went away. So there you go. Once you make all those changes, you can hit save. You can go here to users. You can see the user information and manage users basically from here. You can't do that from the other part of the user interface. That is done through the admin interface. Again, organizations you can see here as well. You can create and get rid of. Diagnostics for the system, so you can kind of check out what you got going on as far as system information. You can look for support information. And then finally, if you want to go back to your vault, you can click on the vault button right here in order to go back to your vault, and it'll open it up in a new tab. And then you can, of course, just log out of the admin system and be done with whatever you're working on there. So if you've not used it and you're interested in a password manager, it's great. So you get this nice feature here where you've got this extension built into your different browsers, and they have it for Chrome, they have it for Firefox, they have it for Safari. I think Vivaldi, I'm not sure about Brave, but there's a lot of extensions for Bitwarden, so get out there and check them out, get them installed, and start using something to protect your passwords. But it's really great because you can set it up so that when you go to a page and it has a login and you have one here, it'll usually identify it. It'll be the only one up here, maybe a couple, depending on how many accounts you have for that system. You can click on the one you want and it'll autofill it and try to submit. And then I think you can even set up this in the settings of your browser extension for it to try to autofill it as soon as you go to the page instead of you having to click on the icon. As long as you're logged into it, it'll try to autofill it and log you in. Now you have to log in using your master password for that system in order to see all of your credentials and logins and for it to get used by the browser. But that's a second step of protection, which is really important for you, right? There's also mobile apps for Android and iOS for Bitwarden, so you can get those and you can put them on your mobile, and then you basically just point the server to your server that you're running once you've got everything set up the way that you want. And that is everything that I've got to tell you about Bitwarden/Vaultwarden this time around. I hope you guys got some really great information out of this. Don't forget that as an open source project, you can go and sign up and support the ongoing development of Bitwarden and even Vaultwarden for that aspect, by coming over here and paying them a little bit of money and offering them a little bit of money to say, you know what, thank you for making such a great application. I mean, $10 a year is just amazing. $3.33 a month is really just, for me, not terrible. I know for some people, $36, $40 a year is a little bit much, but I think for what I'm getting, $40 a year is more than worth it for me. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.